The moment the will was read, the air turned to ice. I hadn't even finished grieving, hadn't had time to absorb the weight of my grandfather's absence, when my mother rose from her seat, placed a perfectly manicured hand on her husband's arm, and declared with smooth certainty, "From now on, Richard will be in charge of the company." I blinked. Richard? My stepfather. The man she'd married less than a year ago. The same man who had spent the last 6 months smirking over dinner, dropping passive comments about how someone my age wasn't ready for real responsibility. I scanned the room. My aunts, uncles, even some of the board members were unmoved, silent, as if this announcement had been rehearsed. Expected. But there was one very inconvenient detail my mother had overlooked. I owned the company now. 1 week before the funeral, I'd sat by my grandfather's hospital bed, holding his frail hand as machines beeped steadily around us. "Mia," he whispered, his voice gravel and breath, "you're the only one I trust." Tears had burned behind my eyes. Of everyone in my life, Grandpa was the only one who never made me feel like a mistake. "Don't let them take what I built," he said, his hand tightening around mine. "They'll try, but don't be afraid. I've prepared everything." At the time, I hadn't understood what he meant. Not fully. Now I did. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. My mother gave him a poised, expectant smile, waiting for him to officially crown her husband as the new head of Whitmore Industries. Instead, he looked directly at me. "According to the last will and testament of Mr. Charles Whitmore," he began, "his entire estate, including 100% of his shares in Whitmore Industries, is hereby passed to his granddaughter, Mia Whitmore." Silence. It hit the room like a thunderclap. Every head turned toward me. "That must be a mistake," my mother said quickly, her voice clipped and icy. "He meant to leave it to me." The lawyer remained composed. "There is no mistake. Mr. Whitmore was very specific. Mia is the sole heir, effective immediately." Richard was the first to speak. He let out a quiet, condescending laugh, as though the whole thing were a theatrical misunderstanding. "Sweetheart," he said, looking at me like I was a toddler in heels, "you can't be serious. A business of this scale isn't a school project. It needs someone with actual experience." The lawyer didn't even blink. He flipped another page in his folder. "Mr. Whitmore made his intentions extremely clear," he said calmly. "Mia is the sole beneficiary of his estate, including his residence, financial assets, and all corporate holdings." I could hardly breathe. I had expected to inherit his stake in the company, but the house, the estate, the everything? I wasn't the only one stunned. My mother's expression twisted, turning cold and controlled. "If that's the case," she said slowly, venom dripping from every word, "then you are no longer welcome here. Pack your things, get out." I raised an eyebrow. "Mom," I said gently, "I think you're the one who misunderstood." I gestured around the room. "This house? It's mine now. Grandpa left it to me." Her jaw twitched. She was fighting the urge to scream. "This is our family home," she hissed. "And now," I replied, voice level, "I'm the only legal family member who owns it." Richard finally stepped in, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, trying to salvage the moment with that familiar condescension he wore like cologne. "Mia, sweetheart," Richard said, using that patronizing tone I knew too well. "You're young. You don't understand the weight of running a company like this. It's more than just an inheritance. It's a responsibility. Your mother and I have years of experience. Let us help you." There it was. The truth, thinly veiled beneath fake concern. This had never been about family. It had always been about control. They thought they had it all figured out. My mother would inherit the company, hand it to Richard, and he'd reign from behind the curtain. But the only person standing between him and my grandfather's empire was me. And now, Richard was trying to smile his way into my future like he hadn't already written me out of it. I crossed my arms and held his gaze. "Let me get this straight. The moment you realized you weren't getting the company, Mom tried to throw me out of my own house, and now you want me to hand it over to you?" His smile faltered. "That's not what I'm saying at all. I just think—" "No," I cut in, my voice calm and razor-sharp. I understand exactly what's happening. You assumed Grandpa would leave it all to Mom. You probably already had meetings lined up, decisions made. But Grandpa saw through you. That's why he left it all. To me. My mother slammed her hand down on the table, the sound echoing through the silent room. Her fury had cracked into desperation. "Mia, you don't know what you're doing," she snapped. "This is a billion-dollar company. It takes more than a lucky inheritance to run something this big." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, steady and unfazed, Mr. Whitmore anticipated this concern. He put measures in place to ensure a smooth transition for Mia. My mother's head snapped toward him. "What measures?" He adjusted his glasses with practiced patience. Mr. Whitmore appointed a team of trusted advisors to support her during her first year as CEO. The board has already been notified. All legal documents have been signed and filed. This is effective immediately. Relief washed over me like breath after drowning. Grandpa hadn't just trusted me. He had protected me. He knew they would try to undermine me, to isolate me. So he made sure I wouldn't be alone. I let her words hang in the air like smoke. Then, slowly, I leaned forward, locking eyes with the woman who raised me, but never believed in me. "I guess we'll see," I said quietly. "Won't we?" The tension in the room was suffocating. My mother's glare was ice and fire all at once. Her fingers curled into fists against the polished table. Richard sat beside her, jaw locked so tightly I thought he might crack a tooth. This wasn't how their story was supposed to end. I was supposed to be the quiet inconvenience, the naive girl they could steer, silence, manipulate. But Grandpa had seen them for who they were, and he'd seen me. "This doesn't make sense," my mother said suddenly, her voice rising with disbelief. "Dad would never do this to me. I was his only daughter. Why would he cut me out of everything?" I turned to the lawyer, the same question rising in me. Grandpa and I had been close, yes, but this? Even I hadn't expected him to leave her nothing. The lawyer exhaled softly, his expression turning grave. He folded his hands on the table. "There's something else you should see." The lawyer's tone didn't falter. "Mr. Whitmore left a letter explaining his decision," he said, producing a sealed envelope from his briefcase. He instructed that I read it in the event of any confusion. Confusion was generous. My mother sat stiffly, her hands clenched on her lap, and Richard's smile had long since disappeared. The seal broke with a soft tear. Then silence. The lawyer began. "Mia, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. And by now, I'm sure your mother is outraged. She'll say it's unfair. She'll insist she was meant to inherit everything. But the truth is, she lost that right a long time ago." I glanced at my mother. Her jaw was locked tight, her face unreadable, but her eyes, they flinched. "Your mother always believed money equaled power, but she never understood that power demands responsibility. Time and time again, I gave her chances to prove herself. Instead, she chose comfort over commitment, selfishness over sacrifice." He paused only long enough to let the words settle. The letter continued. "She always thought that being my daughter was enough to deserve everything I built. But entitlement isn't the same as earning something. And Richard, if he's in the room, I'm sure he's trying to act surprised. Don't be fooled. I know what he is. A leech. A man who married my daughter for her bank account and saw my company as his golden ticket. I won't let my legacy fall into his hands." Richard flushed a deep, dangerous red. His jaw twitched, but he said nothing. "Mia, you are different. You never expected anything from me. You worked. You learned. You respected the business for what it truly is. A legacy, not a cash machine. I watched you grow into someone I could trust. You are the only one who understands that this company was built with sweat and sacrifice. And that's why it belongs to you." My throat tightened. I felt the weight of every summer I spent shadowing him in the office, every hour I spent asking questions my mother called a waste of time. He had been watching me all along, preparing me. "This won't be easy. Your mother will try to guilt you. Richard will try to control you. But remember, I didn't leave you alone. I left you with the tools to win. But Grandpa believed in me. That belief was the only thing keeping me grounded." The next morning, I arrived at Whitmore Industries for the first official board meeting since the will was read. Just like Grandpa promised, his advisors were there, waiting for me, loyal to him, ready to help me lead. I wasn't alone. But as I stepped out of my car, a voice stopped me cold. "Mia." I turned. My mother and Richard were standing near the entrance. Their expressions were unreadable, composed, too composed. "We need to talk," my mother said, her voice unusually smooth. "Just the three of us. No lawyers, no board members, just family. Family." I knew this wasn't about connection. This was about control. They had lost the legal battle. They couldn't take the company by force. This was their last weapon, manipulation. I looked at them both, steady. "Talk, then," I said flatly. Richard's eyes flicked around, cautious. "Not here, somewhere private." I should have walked away, but some part of me wanted to see what they would try next, so I nodded once. 5 minutes. We ended up in a small conference room. Richard sat down like he still belonged there, like he hadn't already been erased from the future. My mother stood with arms crossed, measuring me with cool calculation. "You're in over your head, Mia," she began. Her tone had softened, almost gentle now, rehearsed. "Grandpa put an impossible burden on you. It's not fair. You're too young. This isn't something you should have to face alone." I smirked. "And you think Richard should run it?" Her expression didn't waver, but Richard's smile flickered. "It's not about power," he said, hands spread like he was offering a favor. "It's about stability. We want to help you." "You'll still be the face of the company," he continued. "You'll have the title, the spotlight, but I'll handle the actual operations, the board, the numbers, the day-to-day pressure. You won't have to worry about making the tough calls." "You want me to be a figurehead?" "It's the best arrangement," my mother chimed in. "The board will feel more confident with Richard guiding things. And you, well, you'll avoid the stress of making the wrong decision." She smiled like she was doing me a favor. "You're still so young, Mia. One mistake, and you could ruin everything your grandfather built." There it was, the gentle chokehold of manipulation. Concern coded in condescension. Fear disguised as love. I leaned back in my chair. And what do I get out of this? Richard's face lit up like he'd just sealed the deal. "We'll transfer a portion of the company's monthly revenue into your personal account," he said smoothly. "You'll never have to worry about money again. You can live your life, travel, relax, do whatever makes you happy, and the company stays stable, successful." It was almost impressive how confident they were in their fantasy. They really believed I would just roll over. I paused, pretending to consider. "And what happens if I say no?" My mother's smile vanished. Her voice hardened. "Mia, don't be reckless." "Meaning?" "Meaning," she said carefully. "You'll have enemies. The board doesn't trust you. The shareholders will question your every move. If you refuse to work with us, we won't protect you from that pressure." I tilted my head. "You mean you'll sabotage me?" Richard said nothing, just gave a faint, smug smirk. I let the silence stretch before I stood. "Thanks for the offer," I said, "but I'll take my chances." My mother stood quickly. "Mia, don't do this." I turned to go, but her hand caught my wrist. "Do you really think you can win?" she hissed. "You don't know how this world works. You think your grandfather did you a favor? No. He put a target on your back. The board will eat you alive. The investors will bury you. You need us." I looked down at her grip, then met her eyes. "No, Mom," I said quietly. "I needed you when I was a kid. I needed you to believe in me, but you didn't. You wanted me to fail so you could take what was never yours." I pulled my hand free. "But I'm not a scared little girl anymore." She flinched, just slightly. Richard stood too, his voice rising with frustration. "You're making a huge mistake, Mia. Don't come crying to us when it all blows up in your face." I smiled. "I won't." And I walked out. For good. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. And I was right. 2 days later came the first strike. I entered the boardroom for my first official meeting as CEO, expecting tension, maybe a few polite objections. But what I walked into was an ambush. The moment I took my seat at the head of the long mahogany table, The atmosphere shifted. Heavy, cold, calculated. The board, mostly older men who had worked under my grandfather for decades, sat like a jury. Arms folded, expressions unreadable. Their skepticism filled the room like smoke. I barely had a chance to say good morning before Mr. Holloway, one of the senior board members, leaned forward. His mouth was tight, his voice colder than the marble walls. "Mia," he said, "before we begin, I think we need to address the elephant in the room." I rested my hands calmly on the table. "And what elephant would that be, Mr. Holloway?" He glanced around, gathering silent nods from a few of his allies before continuing. "Your grandfather was a brilliant man," he said. "But let's be honest, he made an impulsive decision by naming you CEO." I kept my expression still. "You don't have the qualifications," he went on. "You don't have the experience, and frankly, many of us are concerned." There it was, the challenge, the opening move. They weren't going to make this easy. Good, because neither was I. I kept my expression neutral. I had expected this, anticipated the resistance, but hearing it voiced aloud still sent a flicker of tension through my chest. It started when I raised a simple question about leadership capabilities. Across the table, I caught Mr. Langston, one of the board members, checking his phone. He sighed, just loud enough to draw attention, and muttered, "The media's already caught wind of the transition. The headlines aren't flattering." My stomach turned. Quietly, I slipped my phone from beneath the table and pulled up the news. The headline struck like a slap. "Whitmore Empire falls into inexperienced hands." Can the AYS handle it? Corporate gamble as 25-year-old Mia Whitmore takes helm. Insiders predict collapse under new CEO. My pulse spiked, but I kept still, composed. This wasn't just bad luck, it was sabotage, and I had a good idea who was behind it. By the time the meeting ended, my phone had 3 missed calls from the PR team. I locked myself in my office and played their messages. "Mia, the media firestorm is growing. We need a response, immediately. Investors are rattled. The stock dipped 3% this morning. We believe someone inside the company leaked those statements. The board is already discussing an alternative leadership plan." Alternative leadership plan. The words rang clear. A coup. I opened my inbox. There it was, formal notice of a leadership vote to reassess the company's direction. Richard. And my mother. They'd orchestrated this, whispered doubts about my age and ability into investors' ears. Fed the press. They were trying to take me out before I even got a chance to stand. I should have panicked. I should have felt helpless. Instead, I smiled, because I had been preparing for this. I picked up my phone and dialed the one person who could turn the tide. It rang twice before I heard his smooth, familiar voice. "I was wondering when you'd call." I exhaled. "I need your help, Lucas." Lucas Sinclair, my grandfather's most trusted ally. A financial strategist who once rescued a crumbling company and built it into a billion-dollar empire. A man who, luckily for me, despised both Richard and my mother as much as I did. "I assume this is about the media circus?" he said, amused. "You assume correctly. The board's holding a vote in 2 days." He chuckled. "Classic corporate betrayal. Well then, Mia, let's remind them why your grandfather chose you." That night, I met Lucas in his glass-walled office, the city lights stretching out behind him. He studied me with a discerning gaze, then smirked. "You're not afraid. Good. Then let's crush them." Together, we crafted a 3-pronged strategy. The boardroom trap Lucas would rally investors who still believed in my grandfather's vision. Before the vote, they'd issue public endorsements in my favor. Media counterstrike, I'd sit for an exclusive interview, reclaim the narrative, speak with clarity, show my qualifications, and read aloud the letter my grandfather left, explaining why I was his choice. Exposing the leak Lucas had the right contacts. We'd trace the source of the smear. If Richard or my mother were behind it, we'd reveal it, loudly and publicly. By midnight, our plan was airtight. I shook Lucas's hand, gratitude tightening in my chest. "Thank you," I said quietly. He grinned. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see their faces when they realize you're not so easy to push aside." The next morning, the headlines began to shift. Mia Whitmore breaks silence. Exclusive interview airs tonight. Whitmore stock stabilizes as investors show support. Smear campaign backfires. Sources point to corporate betrayal. I sat at my desk, watching the narrative bend in my favor. But I knew this wasn't the end. Richard and my mother had made the first move, and they would not go down without a fight. I would be ready. The morning of the board vote arrived cloaked in a cold clarity. I stood beneath the gleaming tower of Whitmore Industries, head high, heart steady. This building, this legacy, was mine, but today would determine whether I claimed it or was forced to walk away before I even got the chance to lead. Inside, the boardroom was filled to capacity. Every chair around the long oak table was occupied by industry giants, many of whom had pledged decades to my grandfather's vision. At the head sat Mr. Holloway, the same man who had once questioned if I belonged here. I let the silence hold for a beat longer than was comfortable. "Funny," I said at last, my voice even. "That's not what you said in your private conversations." His expression twitched. I turned to Lucas. He slid a folder across the table, the sound crisp, deliberate. "In the last week," I said, "Richard and my mother didn't just leak false narratives to the press. They actively undermined Whitmore Industries, negotiating with competitors, attempting to destabilize the market, all to make me look incapable." The board members leaned in, flipping through the folder. Inside, email threads, call logs, even transcripts. The evidence was damning. "What is this?" Mr. Holloway demanded. "Proof," Lucas replied smoothly. "Richard was never trying to protect this company. He was preparing to hollow it out and wear its shell like a crown." Richard stood, voice sharp. "This is slander. You can't—" "But what they didn't understand," I continued, "was that success isn't defined by age. It's forged in pressure. It's about grit, vision, and standing tall even when everyone expects you to fall." The applause thundered, and for the first time, I didn't just feel like I'd won. I felt like I belonged.